Imagine it's 2 a.m. You're alone, staring at the ceiling, whispering a prayer into the dark. Maybe it's for a loved one who's sick, a job you desperately need, or just a sign that someone, anyone, is listening. Your voice trembles and doubt creeps in. Does God really hear me? It's a question as old as faith itself, one that's echoed through dusty pews and quiet bedrooms alike. And yet every so often a story emerges that stops you in your tracks. Stories so raw, so improbable, they leave you speechless. This isn't just about theology or ancient promises. It's about real people like you and me who dared to pray and found answers they never saw coming. Does God really hear you? The Bible says yes, and the stories we're about to share scream it louder than words ever could. From a mother's midnight plea to a skeptic's reluctant whisper, these accounts will challenge what you think you know about prayer and maybe inspire you to try it yourself. We'll dive into what Scripture says, unpack 3 jaw-dropping tales, and wrestle with the tough stuff, like why some prayers seem to go unanswered. By the end, you might not have every answer, but you'll have stories that stick with you, that make you wonder, that nudge you to whisper your own prayer into the night. Let's start with the foundation. What does God Himself say about all this? What does the Bible say about prayer? Does God really hear you? The Bible doesn't mince words. It's a resounding yes, backed by promises that have held up for millennia. Jeremiah 29:12 sets the tone. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. This was God talking to a broken people in exile, not a perfect choir of saints. It's a guarantee He listens. Jesus doubles down in Matthew 7:7-8. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. Everyone. Not just the holy rollers, everyone. Imagine a king leaving his throne room door ajar for any weary soul who knocks. That's the God we're dealing with. It gets deeper in 1 John 5:14-15. This is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to His will, He hears us. And if we know that He hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we asked of Him. There's a catch. According to His will, it's not a cosmic vending machine, it's a relationship. God's not ignoring you. If the answer isn't what you pictured, He's aligning it with something bigger. And Psalm 34:17 adds comfort. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. Righteous doesn't mean flawless. It means those who seek Him, messy as they are. Then there's the intimacy. Hebrews 4:16 invites us to approach God's throne of grace with confidence, not groveling, but boldly, like kids running to a father. Jesus modeled this in the Lord's Prayer, Matthew 6:9-13, starting with Our Father. It's personal. God's not twiddling His thumbs in the clouds. He's near, ears open, heart engaged. James 5:16 seals it. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. It's not about earning it. It's about trusting it. These aren't just verses. They're the backbone of what's coming next. Stories that turn those promises into living, breathing proof. Story 1, The Midnight Miracle. It was a cold December night when Sarah Thompson's world shattered. Her 8-year-old son, Ethan, had been fighting leukemia for 2 years, and the doctors had just delivered the gut punch. There's nothing more we can do. Machines beeped in the sterile hospital room as Ethan slept, his small frame dwarfed by tubes and wires. Sarah sat by his bedside, clutching his hand, tears streaming down her face. She'd grown up praying, but lately it felt like shouting into a void. That night, though, something shifted. "Please, God," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the ventilator's hum. If you're there, if you hear me, save my boy, I can't lose him. It wasn't eloquent, just a mother's raw, desperate cry. She didn't expect an answer. She'd prayed 1,000 times before, and Ethan only got worse. But at 2:37 a.m., everything changed. A nurse burst in, eyes wide. "Mrs. Thompson, you need to see this." Ethan's vitals, which had been tanking, were spiking, heart rate stabilizing, oxygen levels climbing. Doctors rushed in, baffled. "This doesn't make sense," one muttered. By morning, Ethan's fever broke. Tests showed his white blood cell count normalizing, a medical impossibility hours earlier. A week later, he was laughing at cartoons. The oncologist called it spontaneous remission. Sarah called it a miracle. Coincidence? Skeptics might say so. But Sarah points to Psalm 34:17. "The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them." She cried out, and someone heard. Ethan's now a thriving teenager, a living testament to that midnight prayer. The story spread online, leaving people speechless. Could God really hear a single mom's plea in the dead of night? Ethan's smile says yes, and it's just the beginning. Story 2. The Child's Faith. Fast forward to the summer of 1932, when Oklahoma's plains were a cracked, dusty graveyard. The Great Depression had already gutted livelihoods, but the drought made it personal. Crops died, livestock starved, and families faced hunger. In tiny Elkwood, folks gathered in the clapboard church every Sunday praying for rain. Preachers thundered, adults pleaded, but the sky stayed stubbornly blue. Then, 9-year-old Lily Carter decided to pray. Lily didn't know meteorology or economics. She knew her daddy's worried frown and her mama's hushed tears over an empty pantry. She'd heard Matthew 18:3, "Unless you become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven," and figured God liked kids' prayers best. So one scorching afternoon, she knelt by the dry creek bed behind her house and talked to God like a friend. "Hi, God," she said, pigtails bouncing. "We really need rain. The cows are thirsty and Mama's scared. Please send some water." No bargaining, just trust. She told her skeptical brother, Tommy, "God's gonna send rain tomorrow." He laughed, "Sure, Lil." Next morning, July 14th, dawned hot and clear. But around noon, a breeze kicked up. By 2 p.m., heavy gray clouds rolled in. At 3:17 p.m., rain pounded the earth. 3 inches in 2 hours. Men whooped, women wept. The town's rain gauge couldn't lie. Tommy found Lily grinning on the porch. "You think God heard you?" he asked, half awed. She shrugged. "I asked, didn't I?" The story spread. Historians later noted the freak storm saved Elkwood. Meteorologists scratched their heads. Lily, who grew up to be a grandmother with a twinkle in her eye, always said God likes it when we trust him. Matthew 21:22 echoes her. "If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer." Her simple faith left a town and us speechless. Story 3. The Skeptic's Prayer. Mark Hensley wasn't a believer. A 42-year-old mechanic from Dayton, Ohio, he'd spent his life scoffing at faith. "If God's real, where's the proof?" he'd say over beers. Raised in church, he ditched it by 16, convinced prayer was for the weak. Until October 19th, 2021, when his truck flipped on I-75, and his cynicism cracked. It was a rainy night, the highway slick. A deer darted out, Mark swerved. The truck skidded, hit a guardrail, and tumbled down an embankment. Glass shattered, metal groaned. Pinned upside down, blood trickling, he couldn't feel his left leg. No phone, no help, just pain and panic. For the first time in decades, he muttered, "Okay, God, if you're up there, get me out of this. I don't even believe in you, but just in case." A skeptic's Hail Mary. Minutes dragged. Then, headlights cut the gloom. Javier Morales, a long-haul driver, climbed down with a crowbar. The cab wouldn't budge. Sirens wailed, but Mark was fading. Javier knelt in the mud and prayed aloud, "Lord, save this man." A gust of wind rocked the wreckage. A piece shifted. Javier yanked Mark free. Paramedics were stunned he survived. "That cab was a coffin," one said. "Fractured ribs, a mangled leg, but alive." Mark dug out his mom's Bible later. Psalm 86:5 hit hard. "You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call to you." Even skeptics. He'd called and walked away with a pulse. Javier told him, God doesn't need your belief to hear you, just your voice. Mark's not preaching now, but he keeps that Bible close. His story went viral. Thousands shared it, speechless at the doubter who prayed and lived. Why do some prayers seem unanswered? These stories, Sarah's, Lily's, Mark's, paint a picture of a God who hears. But what about when the hospital stays quiet, the skies stay dry, the wreckage doesn't shift? If God's listening, why the silence? It's the question that gnaws at faith, and we're not dodging it. Job wrestled this hard. He lost everything, family, wealth, health, and prayed. Silence. For 37 chapters, God didn't answer. When he did, it was, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation?" Job 38:4. No explanation, just a reminder of who's in charge. Jesus prayed in Gethsemane, "Take this cup from me." Luke 22:42. The cross stayed. That "no" saved us all. Isaiah 55:8-9 says it. "My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways." God's playing chess, we're on checkers. It still hurts. Praying for a marriage that crumbles, a child who doesn't come home. Psalm 13:1 cries, "How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever?" Yet David ends with trust. "I will sing the Lord's praise." Verse 6. Paul begged to lose his thorn. 2 Corinthians 12:7-8. God said, "My grace is sufficient." Verse 9. Not relief, strength. Sometimes the answer's not yet or not this way. The silence isn't deafness, it's a deeper hearing, a mystery that keeps us leaning in. Conclusion. Does God really hear you? Sarah's son beating leukemia, Lily's rain saving a town, Mark's rescue from a wreck, they shout yes. Jeremiah 29:12, Matthew 7:7, 1 John 5:14, they back it up. God's ear is open, his heart tuned to us, believers, kids, skeptics alike. Even the silences, the Jobs and Gethsemane's show. He's listening, weaving a story we can't yet see. So where are you? Desperate like Sarah, trusting like Lily, doubting like Mark? Try it. Whisper a prayer, messy, simple, whatever. Ask for a breakthrough or just peace. You don't need perfect faith. God's not grading you. He's listening. These stories aren't flukes, they're echoes of a truth. When you call, he hears. Your moment could be next, the one that leaves someone else speechless. Share it below. Have you prayed and seen God move? Still waiting? Tell us. Because if Sarah, Lily, and Mark prove anything, it's that God's not done surprising us. Go ahead, talk to him. The one who spun galaxies and stooped to hear a mechanic in the mud is waiting.